This question is excellent, and I know I'm way over the 30-minute mark, but I think this is an important one to talk about. A few key financial essentials adult children of aging parents should be aware of. I'm a 33-year-old with a 76-year-old mother. So this is such a smart question and is something that I think far too few people talk about. And it's one of those things that I think the holidays give a very unique opportunity for you to be together with your parents, with your siblings, and to have these difficult conversations. And don't be mistaken, like these are not easy conversations to have, but they are incredibly important conversations to have. And the truth is that the questions to ask are going to vary greatly depending on your personal circumstances. Like, is your mom still living independently? Or do they need assistance either medically or financially, for example? If they're living independently, let me kind of frame this for you. Imagine if somebody had to step in and assume all your financial responsibilities, right, overnight. If something happened to you, right, if like you just didn't, and this is kind of morbid, but to kind of put it in context, if you just didn't wake up tomorrow, how and who would be capable of coming in and assuming all your financial responsibilities? Like, could they access your bank accounts in order to pay your bills? Would they even know what bills they need to pay? Like, how would they pay your mortgage? How would they pay your basic utilities, for example? That's kind of the thing to start to think about if your parents are still living independently. And when I mean independently, I mean like still have their own house, and things like that. And so you want to start to talk through with them and maybe even put together some type of binder or paperwork that says like, okay, where are all the accounts? What is all the account information? Where are the different assets? Like where is your checking account, for example? Who is your mortgage go to? Are they paying everything online? Like what's the login information and things like that? Like, think about it from that perspective. If I had to assume taking over, paying for all my parents' bills, because the reality is that when somebody passes away, their bills don't just immediately shut off, right? They still keep coming. So that's kind of step one, is thinking through all of that and like how and who would assume those responsibilities. The next thing that you want to talk about is kind of healthcare directives, HIPAA authorizations. If your parent is in good health, that's wonderful. But as your parents get older, it is likely they will have some type of additional medical care that is needed at some point in their life. And it is not always easy if you don't have things like a healthcare directive or HIPAA authorizations for their doctor to be able to communicate with you openly and freely about those decisions. Now, your parent may not want that, and maybe they want a different sibling and not you, or something like that, and that's okay. But there needs to be somebody that's kind of in that role and able to support and help them in the event they reach a point where they're, no longer able to be keeping tabs on all of that themselves. And just as background, like I'm speaking to this from a place of experience and having watched my mom in particular go through this with both of her parents. And she had the ability, we lived growing up like a few houses down from my grandparents. So she had close proximity. If you were living, all different places all around the country, this can all be even more difficult. And it's all the more important to have these conversations. The kind of third thing is like, make sure they have a will, and that it is updated. And then maybe it's more than a will, maybe it's an estate plan, depending on where you live, depending on kind of the assets that your parents have. And so understanding kind of like, is there a will? Is there an estate plan? When was the last time it was updated? Has it all been properly documented? Are the documents signed? Are they notarized if they need to be? Are they witnessed? Like whatever the requirements are in the state where they live, making sure all those boxes are checked, making sure that like somebody has a copy of it, making sure that it's on file. If they had an attorney do it, who is the attorney so that someone can contact them? Is there an executor? Who is the executor? All of those kinds of things, and making sure that like, not necessarily that you need to have all the information, You don't necessarily need to have a copy of it if they want to keep that private, but you need to know who to call and who does have it when the time comes that, it needs to be made available. And then the other thing, and this is kind of like not legal, not financial, but like have conversations about their wishes. And then document them clearly. Like that is really the purpose of a will, but even beyond that, and these can kind of be codicils or amendments or additions to wills, that beyond kind of the legal specifications, but like, okay, what do they want their funeral to be like? Has it been paid for? Is there, did they pay for a plot already? Did they pay for a cremation already? If not, like, what do they want to have happen? And like, are there funds set aside to pay for that? Another thing kind of along those lines is like, a will is going to say we divide the assets. Generally, it's going to say assets are divided kind of equally across all of our children and descendants. But then beyond that, there's kind of like, there's personal effects in a home that aren't so easily broken up like that. Like, do you want to then with your siblings be forced to have an estate sale and you're all getting a chunk of whatever proceeds are generated? Or are there special like mementos and things that like you would like to keep? So have those conversations with your parents and have them say like, and I used to always think this was morbid, but like my grandparents for a while before they passed away, like every time we'd visit, they'd be like, I know you admire that, like just take it. And so things like that, like at the time seem morbid, but in hindsight, like I'm very grateful for the things that I have from them that were gifts to me when they were still alive. And I'm not saying go raid your parents' house right now. But like my grandmother used to give people masking tape and she'd be like, you like that? Go put your name on the back of it kind of thing. And it seems silly at the time, but in hindsight, especially when, in my grandparents' case, they had 8 children, it prevented a lot of like drama and bickering, and there was still drama and bickering in the aftermath, and it was not a significant amount of assets or estate or anything like that. But having these conversations openly as a family, like not just one-on-one with your parents, because sometimes they tell the one what they want to hear, and then they'll tell another one what they want to hear, and they're not the same thing. So having these conversations all together when you're together around the holidays can be a good time for it. And that, don't hear me, like definitely hear me say these are difficult conversations to have, but they're important to have. So those are kind of the main things. So understanding kind of like, and putting something together that gives financial transparency on what are the major bills that have to be paid, how are they being paid, where are the assets kept, and maybe even if there is a health situation, like is somebody a co-signer on those accounts so they can continue to facilitate that relatively seamlessly. Those are some things to consider and think about. Medical authorizations is the other thing. Updated will and estate plan, so like the legal documents, and then just in general, like what are their wishes and making sure those are clearly documented and accounted for. So I hope that helps.